Studio right now, and that's Andrew Fenwick. Andrew is the candidate in the upcoming state elections for the Cessnock Electorate, and he's with the Legalise Cannabis Party. Andrew comes from the Ellamore Vale area, but he's standing here in Cessnock for a seat in the local election, and it's interesting to find out just what is happening with the Legalise Cannabis Party. G'day, Jeff. Andrew, how are you?
Very well, thanks, Warren.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for the time.
And it's always a pleasure to talk to people that are standing and putting themselves forward for election. I know that your party is a little bit different to most.
It is a little offbeat from the normal mainstream, yes.
Yes, that's right. But tell us why you believe people should vote for the Legalise Cannabis Party.
It's a two-pronged thing, Warren. Firstly, I'm also running to be the representative for Cessnock. So I want to sort of divide the two into being a good representative for Cessnock in the Parliament,
yeah,
and to further the law changes that are required around cannabis and hemp
right,
for a variety of reasons. So the party itself is a very passionate group, often people that have got great benefits from different cannabis products, and also from people in the various hemp industries that are looking to expand that industry. And when they prohibited cannabis, they also prohibited the growth of the hemp industry, which is actually a very good industry for agriculture and manufacturing. So there's quite a bit to be achieved by law change, but also I think the area could do with some new representation in the Parliament as well.
Okay, well, we'll obviously explore, first of all, your ideas on the legalising cannabis, which is one of the mainstays of your party, because that's the name of your party.
Yeah, that is. It's pretty straightforward.
So we can't overlook that. Do you believe that the public are now at a time in their, I suppose, development that they can accept something like legal cannabis in society?
I hope we can, and partly because a lot of people are coming across cannabis now because they're ill. And a lot of people wouldn't have even thought about cannabis apart from the fact they've met somebody who's had great benefits from it. So since they made it legal as a recommended medication,
yeah,
because it's actually not a prescribed medication, it's a TGA recommendation for someone, people are getting great results for a really wide range of health conditions. And that's actually, I suppose, brought it to the front of a lot of people's minds, especially as we age. There's so many benefits to cannabis, from neuroprotective to pain relief to insomnia to appetite enhancement, general well-being, anxiety. There's a lot of things that people can get benefit from, but because it was made illegal, it's sort of become really hard to access.
The problem that I see as one of your mainstays of your thrust is that you want to legalise it to enable people to grow their own or to produce their own.
Yeah.
Now that's maybe puts a bit of a red flag up for a lot of people, because this means it's lost the control features that we probably currently have for the people that are using it for health benefits.
Yeah, and that's true. One of the problems with the medically prescribed cannabis is it's dreadfully expensive.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to get for people. And in reality, cannabis is actually quite a safe herbal product. Probably one of the safest things that people could be using in terms of their recreation and relaxation. Alcohol is by far a more dangerous substance, and we accept that and embrace it and actually encourage it as part of our normal culture. So growing something at home is no different than somebody brewing 30 bottles of beer every month for themselves.
Yeah, although we're looking now at a particular aspect of alcohol, and you mentioned beer, but there's lots of alcohol on the market that's controlled, and it's not the sort of thing most people would brew at home.
Oh no,
and brandies and all those things are different altogether.
Yeah, but a lot of people do.
Yeah,
you're allowed to distill a certain amount of alcohol, and you can make grappa and wine and all these things, and nobody controls the alcohol content or how many you're having. The difference, I suppose, with cannabis is it's a bit like vegetable growing. Everyone can grow vegetables, but most people don't. And this will be the same. The part of legalisation allows for the retail sale So that's when you come back to a point where there's more control, there's more regulation, there's revenue for the government for taxing, and even just the regulatory processes will cost money. So there's money for the government to be had, and there's also money to be saved because law enforcement for cannabis is hundreds of millions of dollars a year to enforce something that's safer than alcohol.
The interesting thing there is that we're looking at people using it in a controlled environment, growing it to use for pain relief or whatever. That's fine. But I think we do also appreciate the fact that there are going to be cases where it's going to be abused.
Oh, absolutely. And that's sort of no different than somebody abusing their prescribed medication or drinking too much. It's the same.
Except the prescribed medication. Like, for example, I'm on, because of my legs, I'm on oxycodone, I'm on very strong painkillers. I can't manufacture them at home.
I know, but the effects of those painkillers are far more dangerous than using cannabis.
Yeah.
So even the incidence of people getting into a health problem because of cannabis use are very, very rare, and it's not addictive. So it's more of a psychological relief, which is why they continue to use it. And we've got to admit that most people who drink too much or use drugs or smoke too much cannabis, they're actually self-medicating some sort of pain or trauma anyway.
Yeah, you say it's not addictive though. We've got lots of stories where people are addicted to cannabis as well as other products, of course. But so you don't believe it is addictive?
Oh, there's no science that would suggest that it's actually addictive, like an opioid or ice or heroin or anything like that. It's because it's not a narcotic as such.
Now, the public themselves are going to be very concerned and sceptical. For a train driver, for example, that you are, to be pushing for the use of cannabis and saying to themselves, well, hell's bells. They're pulling drivers over and doing tests on motor vehicle drivers and driving their own vehicle, only putting themselves at risk, and finding a problem with cannabis. But is it possible that people such as yourself, a train driver, with many, many lives in the balance, could be affecting their ability to carry out their job?
I suppose it works on the same principle as I was saying before, like everything else that we're doing now, currently. The first thing about roadside drug testing for cannabis is that there's actually no correlation between THC content and impairment. So at the moment, you can be put to a random drug test on the side of the road and have the minutest amount of THC in your system from a week ago and still lose your licence and still get fined. And that's one of the problems for the people using medical cannabis, because there's still no medical defence for cannabis use. So you can be off your dole on oxy or benzodiazepine or something like that. That's not tested for. You're just trusted to not drive when impaired. And it's the same deal. Most people who would be using cannabis on a normal relaxation or social basis are going to do just like they do drinking. Like every shift I sign on to as a train driver, I'm breath tested.
You're breath tested, of course you are.
So they're testing for my impairment, but they're not testing for my hangover. Yeah. So I could have had 15 schooners the day before, blow zero on the machine, but be nauseous, tired, headachy, fuzzy-minded, but because it doesn't show up on the machine, I'm right to go.
Is there a way of testing for impairment though? This is a difficulty.
That is a difficulty, but if we're going to be doing anything for safety, it has to be about impairment. So there's probably a threshold of THC, like there is with alcohol, where you could say, clearly you've had that just recently, like before you came to work, and you will most likely be impaired.
Yeah.
Like alcohol, a smoked or vaped cannabis product, you have no impairment after about 2 or 3 hours. If you eat it, edible cannabis products, it can be 6 to 8 hours because it starts slower, lasts longer. If somebody on Friday night vaped some cannabis with his friends at a party, he would be quite fine to sign on Saturday morning and go to work, and he'd be totally unimpaired.
All right, and of course there's going to be people that are going to argue probably with it, but you've also got a background of being a medical herbalist, so you've got some knowledge there of this as well.
And that's certainly been something that's I suppose, piqued my interest more. I actually am a friend of one of the Western Australian MLCs, and with the Legalise Cannabis Party, and he's a prescribing doctor in Western Australia, so I had lots of conversations with him about the different benefits that his clients were getting from it. And a lot of the things that we're learning about cannabis now, in terms of the endocannabinoid system in the body, that wasn't even being taught when I was doing my studies. It was only discovered in the late 90s. So a lot of the receptors in the body that are actually using the cannabis to get benefit, we didn't even know they existed. So it's a very interesting field, and it's got a lot of scope for lots of people.
And it's opening up more and more, of course, more and more knowledge of these types of things. Not just that. I had a very good friend, he passed away unfortunately, who ended up with very widespread cancer following prostate cancer. But after the prostate cancer, he ended up with very widespread bone cancer.
Yeah, not very painful.
And he was on cannabis oil, and that was prescribed through John Hunter Hospital. He was on the Central Coast. He couldn't get it down the Central Coast through a hospital, but he was able to get that prescribed through a specialist pain relief from the John Hunter Hospital, and he did find that was of great benefit to him.
Yeah.
But there's a different stigma, I think, to putting a few drops of cannabis oil under your tongue to relieve pain, and actually getting high on puffing away on weed.
Oh, absolutely. And the stigma, a lot of it is as much marketing as anything else. We've had, like from the late 30s in America, they started demonising cannabis, and it was pretty much a political and racial move by the government of the time because of the cannabis was coming up from Mexico, and the black Americans were using it in the South, and there was a real push after Prohibition to make sure that something else didn't come up. And then in the 70s, Nixon did the same thing again. So when the Vietnam War was on, the protests were all being sort of led by students and hippies and black people, and incorporating cannabis into the war against narcotics, he was able to arrest and oppress a lot of people. Up until that point, there was a very widespread, and still is, I mean, the estimate is over 40% of Australians have used or still use cannabis at some point. Making it illegal doesn't seem to be fair. And like I said before about people self-medicating, most people that I'm talking to through the party and even around Cessnock, the benefits they're getting, it's not about being high, it's the benefits. One young fellow I've been working with, he's 30 years alcoholic and functioning heroin addict, and what got him off all that was cannabis. So he's just turned 4 years clean of heroin because he moved to cannabis. He's back at TAFE, he's studying, he's building a new life for himself because of cannabis. So a lot of the stigma is just marketing, and it's, I suppose, the alcohol lobby doesn't really want it to come in because most areas where cannabis is legalised, alcohol consumption drops off. Pharmaceutical companies aren't really that keen on it either because opioid use drops by 40 to 50% everywhere where it's been legalised, because people can switch to something that's less harmful and as effective. And sometimes they're growing it at home, but most of the time they're just going to a dispensary and buying it.
Right. Okay, well, we'll see what comes out of this election and see just what support the Legalise Cannabis Party is actually able to attain. You've obviously spoken to a lot of people before you ran. You don't take these things on lightly, I'm sure.
Not at all.
And I'm sure you will get lots of votes from people that can see the benefits from legalised cannabis.
Yeah, I hope so.
And you did say you have other parts to your desire to run, where you want to see other things happen for the state seat of Cessnock. So are you putting those forward in your policy statements at the moment, or is it just concentrating on the cannabis?
Because, like, from a party point of view, we're a one policy party. Where we're running people in the lower house, they're all locals that are trying to do better for their communities. So it's the same for me. Like, I've got a lot of ties to Cessnock. I might not be living actually in the boundaries right now, but my grandfather was born here. I've got 2 children here. I've got 2 grandchildren here. My first 2 properties were here till my children were born at home in the Electorate. So I work here. I work in and out of the Electorate, and I socialise here and I recreate here. So I'm in Cessnock a lot.
Yeah. And so part of your policy is a personal policy.
Yeah.
Or not? It's not a party.
It's not a party policy.
It's a
so
personal policy.
And this is probably the benefit in. I understand that you've got a bit of a leaning towards the Labor Party. And,
I remember the Labor Party.
Yeah.
I don't.
And I've voted Labor
Yeah.
all my adult life up until just recently.
Yeah.
And it's not because I don't like Labor. I'm actually really pleased to see Albo in place, and I'm really pleased to see that Chris Minns will be the next Premier of the state. I just don't think that at the moment the Labor Party is serving this electorate very well, and I don't think another 4 or 8 years of the current incumbent is going to serve Cessnock very well. I've got a wide life experience. I'm a tradesman, I'm a train driver, I'm a herbalist, I'm a project officer. I've had my own business, I've built business. I've been a single parent. I've remarried into a blended family. I've done a lot of things.
Yeah.
And
so you've got something to offer as a person.
as a person, yeah. And I'm a go-getter. Like I get things done, and even taking on a role like sitting as a candidate for a seat, it's not an easy job. It's certainly not for the faint-hearted, and
No, that's true.
it's taken a lot of work.
Yeah.
But I've been throwing myself at it like I throw myself at things, and that is I get things done. So my aim is to, politically, I sit very much the same as you do, but I have the freedom to pursue the things for the community rather than just the things that the party is willing to pursue for the community.
Okay.
So I think it's just time that Cessnock had a representative in government instead of a government representative in Cessnock.
Okay,
That's catch cry.
we'll take that catch cry as the final few words of our talk today. But thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Warren.
And I wish you all the very best and all the best of success, if not with the election within the Cessnock Electorate for the Legalised Cannabis Party, but your personal platform of getting to legalise something that you believe to be of great benefit, that continues and that you do have some success there as well.
Yes, and that's part of the plan. I mean, I really, really would like to have the opportunity, and I'd be honoured if the people of the electorate gave me the chance to be the representative.
Yeah.
But certainly the action doesn't stop here in terms of the laws that need to be changed, and there's actually a great industry for regional areas like this in cannabis and hemp. There's new employment, there's new jobs, there's new revenue. It's a bit of a no-brainer, really.
Okay, all the very best.
Great, thanks, Warren.
And enjoy the rest of the campaign.
I'm sure I will.
It's going to be a lot of work, as you said.
It is.
But I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
Excellent. Thanks for your time.